if anybody starts by saying, this isn't really a question, it's more of a point, I may have you carried out of the room without any further warning or ado. So we want to get the answers from the politicians on the stage. And if it's all about getting your own opinion in front of the country, then you can phone me up tomorrow any time after 10 o'clock. So please now join me in welcoming to the stage the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, the Deputy Mayor for the Environment, Shirley Rodriguez, for Business, Rajesh Agrawal, for Transport, Heidi Alexander, for Housing, James Murray, for Crime, Sophie Linden, and that concludes the invitations for this evening. And I'm delighted to see that we already have a cabaret in the room this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your interventions. I will now, with no further ado, invite Sadiq Khan to address everybody in this room, whether they have greeted him with politeness or not.
It's great to be here this evening, the most exciting 90 minutes of live action taking place anywhere today. I've been a mayor now for a little over 2 years. And during this time, we've seen some incredibly positive changes and new opportunities opening up for Londoners. But we've also experienced a series of tragic events, unprecedented in recent times. The Grenfell Tower fire tragedy and 3 terrorist attacks where lives were lost and people injured. We've recently marked the anniversaries of these events, and understandably, emotions are still raw. As we come together tonight, I know all our thoughts are with the families of the victims and everyone affected.
Okay. I'm afraid I'm going to dispense with the 2 warnings. Chaps, thanks for coming down. I really appreciate it. No, seriously, but we have to be able to hear from everybody else in the room. You'd have been welcome to take your turn. Thank you and good night. I'd like to apologise to everybody who's come here this evening in good faith, expecting to enjoy a civilised evening. We will be resuming normal service momentarily.
Why do you hide the facts?
Thank you. Well done. Safe journey home. My apologies again. And a very good night to you as well, sir. I now, with great pleasure, hand you back to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Ladies and gentlemen, before taking your questions, I want to touch on 2 key issues: policing and crime and affordable housing. My top priority will always be the safety of Londoners. And one of the biggest issues we're grappling with is the rise in violent crime, a problem we're seeing across the country. In London, our police services are overstretched, under-resourced, and facing massive cuts from the government. Despite this, we're working to do everything possible with the powers we have, targeting criminals and removing weapons from the streets. But as well as being tough on violent crime, we also need to be tough on the causes of violent crime. That's why, in addition to City Hall investing £138 million in the police, we're investing £45 million to help provide an alternative path away from crime for young Londoners. Crime has been on the rise since 2014, and it's going to take some time to turn this around. But I'll continue to do everything I can, including supporting our police and investing in young Londoners, while putting pressure on the government to play its part by providing crucial funding that we need. On affordable housing, there's no question we still face a major housing crisis. But for the first time in decades, we're taking steps to turn things around. I know that having a genuinely affordable home can make a difference because it's the story of my life. That's why I'm proud that last year we started building more genuinely affordable homes than in any year since City Hall took control of housing. And this includes starting to build more social homes in 1 year than in the previous 4 put together. I've been candid about this from day one. We're not going to be able to turn things around quickly. It takes time to turn a tanker around, but I'm optimistic that we're heading in the right direction. In London, these reforms from policing and housing to air quality and affordable transport are about a safer, fairer, and more equal city. This is in stark contrast to the world around us and what we've seen tonight, becoming increasingly polarized and extreme. Our changing economy has left too many people feeling left behind by globalization, and the government's policies and cuts over the last 8 years haven't helped. They've compounded the problem and are inflicting damage in our communities and causing poverty, inequality, and rising crime. In London, we mustn't be dragged down by this. It only leads to anger and division. We all want to live in a city that's not weakened by inequality and division, but strengthened by fairness and unity. I passionately believe that now isn't the time to dispense with our open values and the progress we've already made. Now is the time to push ahead, to build the genuinely affordable homes we need, to continue our relentless fight against violent crime and the causes of violent crime, and to ensure all Londoners can fulfil their potential. I'm looking forward to this evening and answering your questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Sadiq Khan, and welcome once again to the O2 Indigo. If I just take a moment to acknowledge that some of you here this evening are clearly very angry, and that's absolutely fine. But everybody here this evening is hoping to hear from the people on the stage in answer to the questions that come from the floor. So by all means, vent your anger quietly, but if you could perhaps desist from interrupting the proceedings that we're here to undertake, and which everybody who understood what it said on the ticket has come to do here tonight, I'd be really very grateful. So we will begin with question 1 from Area 1, which makes it sound a little bit like Roswell. Fraser is, I believe, from Gatwick and should be. This is why I brought my glasses. Fraser, what would you like to ask the Mayor and his deputies?
Firstly, I just want to say it's an incredibly disappointing way to do politics, what those people have just done. I'm incredibly embarrassed, so I apologise. My question to Sadiq is, given Boris Island, what would your radical solution be to airport expansion in London?
Well, thank you for your question and for what you said. Look, I accept the case that there is a need for increased aviation capacity in this part of the country. What I refuse to accept is an expansion that leads to the air in London getting even worse, the noise pollution becoming even worse, it leading to all sorts of congestion and unanswered questions about who's going to pay the cost of improving road links and public transport links to Heathrow. I'm not against Heathrow per se. I want a better Heathrow, not a bigger Heathrow. And there's an alternative. The alternative would be a new runway at Gatwick. Hasn't got the air quality problems, hasn't got the noise pollution problems. It's quicker and it's cheaper as well. But unfortunately, the government's ploughing ahead with its plans to expand Heathrow. So I've announced I'll be joining the 5 councils in challenging in court the decision from the government.
Do you think it is going to go ahead? I appreciate that you're going to challenge it in court, but what do your instincts tell you?
I think this will be dragged into years of delay, not simply the legal challenge that we're bringing, but all sorts of other issues the government have. There are 2 big issues. One is the Transport Select Committee raised a number of concerns which the government haven't addressed, but the government themselves have a number of conditions that need to be satisfied before the expansion can take place. I don't see how Heathrow can address those concerns. And over the last 2 days, we've heard concerns from airlines worried about who's going to pay the cost of this expansion. And so I'm not sure it's going to go ahead. The point I make, though, is there's an alternative. If the argument is we've got to be pro-business, we've got to support the expansion of aviation in the southeast of England, there's an alternative, and the alternative is Gatwick.
Would you like to invite the Deputy Mayor with relevance to this to add to what you've said, or are you happy to carry the ball solo?
Happy to be instructed by you, James.
Well, I don't know if there's anything to add to that. I think that probably most Londoners feel a little bit confused. The previous mayor was going to lie down in front of the bulldozers. You've swiveled on this, haven't you? You've undertaken a U-turn on Heathrow. Just remind the audience of what you used to say and why you've changed your mind.
I've not changed my mind in relation to the need for increased aviation capacity.
No, I said Heathrow, not air capacity.
So it's important to explain your premise of your question. But what I think is, because of the concerns we have around air quality, because of the concerns we have around noise pollution, because of the concerns we have around cost, I'm now no longer in favour of an expanded Heathrow. What I'm in favour of is the alternative, which is a new Gatwick. And I'm here answering your questions rather than being in Afghanistan.
No, reference to the previous mayor. Were you surprised that he didn't keep his promise to resist the third runway proposal?
Not at all.
Move on now to a question from Area 2. Steve is from Greenwich, so you haven't come far. Steve, what would you like to ask the mayor and his deputies?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor. You see, this morning at LBC, they launched the story, or broke the story, that Boris's cycle highway on the embankment was installed with the knowledge that it was have to be dug up at incredible cost for the building of the new super sewer. We also learned this evening that it's going to be closed for possibly 6 months, and that TfL have taken the decision today to close it to vehicular traffic and yet leave it open to the cyclists, whilst the cycle highway is only predominantly used during the rush hours. Perhaps you'd like to comment on that.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've previously expressed concern about is the way these cycle superhighways were constructed in relation to the lack of consultation, the disruption it caused during the construction, and the problems there were. I'm pro-cycling. I think we've got to get people across London walking, cycling, using public transport. Our population is growing. It's gone from 7 to 8 million. It's now approaching 9 million, and we're going up to 10 million by 2030. So we've got to think innovatively about people who get across our city. That means encouraging people to walk, cycle, and use public transport. The Commissioner of TfL himself has expressed concern about the way the previous mayor...
Can we just explain to us how it happened? Because you're right, it was a scoop. It was a top scoop on LBC this morning to establish effectively that Boris Johnson did know that the road was going to have to be dug up sort of shortly after the cycle superhighway had been built. But I don't want to spend the entire evening blaming your predecessor for everything that's gone wrong in London. Well,
go on.
Operationally, how does this happen? I mean, just for the lay people in the room, how on earth can some serious infrastructure work be completed, whether the mayor knew about it or not? How can people in the structure, people still at City Hall, not have said, why are we doing this? How can we be doing this? We're going to have to dig the road up again.
The short answer is the mayor has huge powers. And that's why it's really important to have checks and balances in place. We've seen with the Garden Bridge. We've seen with the way some of this construction took place. We've seen other examples of public money being wasted on vanity projects. And that's why when I became mayor, I introduced checks and balances to hold me to account, because I think it's good for democracy to have politicians held to account. And by the way, James, it leads to better decisions being made. And that's why Will Norman, the Walking and Cycling Commissioner, spends so much time going around London speaking to councils, speaking to communities, you know, in your part of London, in West London, the concern there's been, because only 5% of the roads are controlled by TfL. The rest are controlled by councils and others. And so Heidi, Will, myself spend a lot of time speaking to Londoners, persuading them why it's in all of our interest to have more walking and cycling rather than steamrolling ahead. And so I will consult, I will listen, and sometimes, Steve, I'll change my mind because I'm persuaded by the scrutiny that I'm held under.
I still, forgive me, I still don't feel that I understand how it can happen. And I appreciate, again, I'm asking you to account for the previous regime. But, Steve, I mean, your interest is presumably as a frequent road user. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest your livelihood possibly depends upon getting around.
It does indeed, well guessed.
So these people are already having to suck up the Uber debacle, and now they're basically being told that anybody who's thinking of hailing a cab near the embankment for a significant period of time would be better off on a pogo stick. It's outrageous.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing what we can to help the black cab, the taxi trade. It's really important. So Steve been working with us, and can I thank Steve for working with us in relation to having more, taxi cab ranks. His advice has led to us making sure we have more enforcement officers to stop illegal minicabs operating across London. His advice has also meant we're trying to make sure only more bus lanes under my control. We're persuading councils to use more bus lanes as well. There are basically 23,000 black cab drivers who spent some time invested in doing the knowledge and spent a lot of money buying a black cab, and they're a vital part of the public transport system.
I still don't know. Heidi Alexander, can you tell me, if Sadiq decided to build, I don't know what we'd call it, the Sadiq Khan superhighway, and there were people in City Hall warning him that this was going to involve announcing it, cutting the ribbon, getting the big launch party, and then 6 months later digging the road up again, do you understand, I know you haven't been there long, do you understand the mechanisms you could employ to stop it from happening?
Well, I don't actually think that would happen.
But that's not the point of the question.
I mean, I've been in the job, I think, for about 2.5 weeks now, and what strikes me is that there's a really good working relationship between the officers at Transport for London and the Mayor's office. Now, I think we all know one thing about Boris Johnson, don't we? And that is that he will put his political interest above the day-to-day interests of Londoners. And we saw that when he disappeared off to Afghanistan this week.
Do you understand, even after 2.5 weeks, how something so signally silly can have been signed off? Because it doesn't just cross one desk. This is the State of London debate, and the State of London is informed by his mayoralty as well as Sadiq Khan's mayoralty. And I don't think anyone in the room, least of all Steve, understands how on earth this can happen. It's surreal.
Well, as I say, I've been in the job for, I think it's my 14th day sat at my desk, and I've spent time understanding what is happening in London at the moment, not going over the decisions of Boris Johnson when he was mayor, and I struggle to understand how this decision was taken. The thing that strikes me about when you're Mayor of London, you need to do your homework. And Boris Johnson never did that. Now, we do need to take some difficult decisions to deliver cycling infrastructure, because people need to want to cycle more often, to feel safer, to make it easier. And I think under Sadiq's leadership, we're making really good strides in that. I went up a couple of days ago and saw all the work that's happening on the north-south cycle superhighway that will connect Elephant to King's Cross. We've got some brilliant quiet ways, Quiet Way 1 that goes from Deptford in this part of southeast London up to Tower Bridge. And so I am concerned about the decisions that Boris Johnson took in the last administration. I can't explain to you why he took those decisions. And as Sadiq said as well, there were some dodgy decisions around the Garden Bridge. That's not happening anymore. And we've got to have a professional, strong working relationship between the Mayor of London and Transport for London if we're going to get the sort of transport network that we want and that we need.
And you're absolutely, your short tenure in post notwithstanding, you're absolutely certain that there's no way this super sewer can be built without the levels of disruption that have been reported today.
This is a huge bit of infrastructure which is actually going to have some really positive outcomes. It's going to clean up the river. It's Victorian infrastructure, and that is one of the problems in London, that whether you're upgrading the tube network or upgrading the sewerage, these are big, complex projects. And so what Transport for London looked at, in the last couple of weeks has been about how we ensure that people are safe on the roads, keeping that cycle superhighway open, where 12,000 people a day are cycling along it. We couldn't reroute that safely. So there will be, some knock-on impact, and we appreciate that this is really, really painful for people that are using the road network in central London. But we are doing other things as well to look at how we tackle congestion. So, for example, we've seen lots of white vans proliferating in the centre of London, delivering orders that people are making on Amazon and things like that. And so we actually need to be thinking about, you know, modern 21st century solutions to the problem of tackling congestion as well. There is going to be a bit of pain associated with delivering the super sewer, but we have to take sensible decisions, listening to the advice of experts at Transport for London to make sure we're doing it in the least disruptive way possible.
Thank you, Heidi Alexander. Let's go to Area 4 now, where I think Corey from Ealing has what will probably be our final question on transport, and then we can crack on with some safety questions before the news. It gives us a little more time on that issue than we had previously expected to get. So where's Corey? Hello, mate.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hiya.
You are aware of the campaign that I've started to improve the lives of disabled commuters in London, as I've written to your office, and I believe you're receiving updates from the petition. I'm asking TfL to add "Look up, does someone need your seat?" to their automated announcements. Can I rely on your support with this campaign, and will you use the full powers of your office to make sure that TfL will implement the change to help disabled commuters in London?
Absolutely. It's
Excellent.
very important. I mean,
Thank you.
Can I?
When do we come and check?
It is really important. I mean, public transport must be what it says on the tin. And there are so many Londoners who have hidden disabilities or disabilities that are visible that we need to make sure we address. So, for example, just to give you some ideas of what we're doing, you've seen the badges we've now got in circulation. We piloted it, it works, and it's really good, it's innovative. We've got investment to have more step-free stations than ever before. We currently have 74. The idea is in the next 2-3 years, go up to 50% of the tubes, London Overground, the Elizabeth Line, trams being accessible to those who use wheelchairs. Really important. But you're right, simple announcements can help us all be aware, because it's part of living in a civilised city, the fact that those of us who haven't got disabilities help those that have so they can get about our city.
Just give people in the room, Corey, an idea of how limiting it is, because I appreciate there's myriad different types of disability, but it's always quite illuminating for those of us who aren't disabled to notice how few, for example, if you went and looked at the map at the tube station over the way, how few of those stations actually have proper access. What is your daily experience?
It's very difficult, and on the way here I got out at Green Park to change onto the Jubilee line, and only once I was off the tube did I find out that the lift was broken. So you're expected to get back onto another tube during rush hour. Everyone's looking down, and the badge scheme is fantastic, and it's especially good for people with invisible infirmities or impairments. But if people aren't looking up, and it's not selfishness, it's just how we travel in London. It isn't people being mean. It is just the case that people don't look up. And I think a simple announcement would go a long way. TfL have been very positive, but I really would like your backing, and I'd like you to speak to them and get this implemented.
We could do this overnight, can't we?
Yeah, we can. But also we can go a step further, which we are. We now also have trained all our staff to make sure they're aware. Because you're right, some of the time it's just not being aware. And just making people aware by training makes a big difference. That includes our bus drivers. Over the last 2 years, we've spent a considerable amount of time training up and professionalising bus drivers as well. And you'll have been aware of the recent decision we've taken to make sure those who are in wheelchairs and get onto a bus have space on the bus for them to use, particularly when there's a potential conflict between mums and dads with buggies and those in wheelchairs as well. And I'm really proud of the progress we've made. But James is right. There's no reason why we can't speed it up. And let me get back to you. Before you leave, I want one of my staff to get you details. And I know you email anyway, and I'll give you a timeline of when we'll see some change that you can notice and be proud of.
That's hugely appreciated. Thank you.
And you know where you can get hold of me if you don't hear from him. Let's move on now to the issues of safety and security, which I think everyone in the room would agree have assumed a new air of urgency in recent months and years. We'll begin with Amin, who's from Poplar. Amin, what would you like to ask?
Mr. Mayor, I'm a brand new Londoner, having moved to Poplar less than 30 days ago, and I'm really nervous sort of running to Canary Wharf's tube station to get to work every day. As a brand new Londoner, and everyone can see the challenges that face London globally, including most of my family who are overseas, how do I convince my family that I'm going to keep safe?
Where have you come from? I mean,
I've come from Hampshire.
Hampshire.
but I'm originally from Dubai.
Sure. So the concerns you're articulating are concerns felt by many Londoners and many of us who have family and friends outside of London. Because over the last period, we've seen an increase in serious violent crime. That's why your family and friends outside of London are concerned about you being able to jog from Poplar to Canary Wharf, aside from your own concerns. So firstly, I recognise the concerns you have, and actually the figures bear out your concerns. Just for those that aren't aware, actually, we've seen over the last 4 years an increase in serious violent crime across England and Wales and in London as well. Let me give you examples of the steps we're taking, not only for you to be safer, but hopefully for you to feel safer as well. Over the last 2 years, I've used all the powers I've got to raise more council tax and use it towards policing. But also we've done something brand new this year, which is use business rates to pay for more policing. So over the last couple of years, we've spent, roughly speaking, £138 million to make sure our police numbers don't go any further down. And so now we've got, roughly speaking, 30,000 officers. It's still fewer officers than we've had since 2003, but it's not going down anymore. So that's the good news. But secondly, we're also investing in particular things to make sure you're safe. So let me give you some examples. We've now got a specialist team of officers, 150 officers, who are part of what's called a violent crime task force. And they go around London every day of the week in those areas that are known high violent crime areas. And just in the last week, they've taken off our streets hundreds of knives. They've made a number of arrests. And in the last 6 months alone, they've taken off our streets 1,000 knives. That should give you some confidence that the police are taking actions to make you safer.
Well, they're more likely then to move to the areas where the crime isn't at a particularly high rate, as we've already seen this week.
I mean, the bad news, James, and the bad news for Amin is across England and Wales, crime is going up. I was with the mayors of Liverpool, Manchester, West Midlands, Tees Valley, West of England 2 weeks ago, and each of their regional media were asking them questions, and guess what their questions were about? The rise in crime. And so it's not a problem unique to London, but the advantage we've got is we've had in the last 2 years the biggest rollout of body-worn cameras of any police force in the world. And that will give the police the confidence now to do targeted stop and search, knowing that the public will have confidence in coming forward, but also the police will be confident in using this tool. And actually, for a global city, crime in London is quite low compared to other global cities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll tell my family in Dubai your message. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
I can only hear, all of us can only hear one voice at once.
Right? We had 51 people who have fatally been stabbed in London since the beginning of this year. One of those people was stabbed 200 yards from a close police station here in Greenwich, where I live. Already from 2018, we have 1,296 reported stabbings in London, according to these statistics. One of those happened outside that same police station that is closed down, my local police station. There are no bobbies on our street. Right, Londoners, we don't feel safe. Our communities do not feel safe. You give me statistics, Mr. Khan, and that's fair enough. But for me, as a parent, I'm telling you, we do not feel safe. This gentleman doesn't. We don't feel safe in London. Yeah. And we want you to come back to the statistics.
It's not,
In 1 month alone, 250 knives and swords were seized in February alone in London.
I think.
No, hang on.
So I can let my son out in the streets of London safe and feel safe.
And this is a feeling that is widespread, and it is. I mean, it's not confined to any particular parts of the community or any particular parts of the city. We are measurably and demonstrably less safe under your mayoralty than we were under the last one. With respect, I would like to hear the mayor's answer.
Over the last 4 years, I mean, it's really important to look at the evidence. And the evidence is over the last 4 years, across England and Wales, crime has been going up. But across the last 8 years, I know you're talking about numbers can sometimes appear like we don't understand the concerns that Londoners have. But across the last 8 years, we as a city have lost £720 million from our budget. Now, that has had an impact because...
Again, I need to hear what the mayor is saying. You're perfectly entitled to say it's not about money, but that is what they pay police officers with.
Well, I mean... And so we have seen across the last 4 years, by the way, across the country, crime in London is going up less steeply than crime across England and Wales. But
we're going to come back to this after the news headlines. Madam, I'll come back to you as well. There's plenty of time for more questions on safety, and we can also address perhaps a little bit more directly what Amin can tell his parents if they're worried about him being on the streets of London. I mean, you know, most people on this panel this evening are parents. These fears are not unique to any section of the community or any type of family, and they're presumably fears shared by you as well. So more of this after the very latest news headlines brought to you on LBC by Tim Humphrey. I wish we could hear the jingles in here. It's kind of surreal not being able to hear the radio while we're ostensibly on it. So I think we've suffered enough, I think. The visual cue that I'll give you when we return, again, a polite smattering of applause, and we'll continue with events. Focusing inevitably on this question of reassurance, actually, is what Amin wants, and he's not going to be reassured by necessarily just numbers and statistics. So we'll see whether or not we can provide something a little bit more substantive. In the meantime, I thought I'd treat you to Danny Boy. So shut up. And how am I going to be made aware that the news is finished? That was a serious question. Mum? So they're going to put now on my screen. That is the super high-tech space-age technology that we're employing here this evening. They'll put now on my screen. I'll go like that. You'll start clapping, and we're back in the room. I might go early, and as soon as I see the N. They put new. We've gone early, but put your hands back in your pockets. No, start clapping again. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome back to a rather fractious O2 Indigo this evening for the State of London. No, I've gone early. I get paid for this. Don't I?
Performance related. Let's hope it's not performance related, James.
Yeah, steady on. Thank you very much, and welcome back to a rather fractious and feverish State of London debate here at the O2 Indigo, and we are right in the middle of what will probably prove to be the most feverish element of tonight's questions. We're looking at safety. Amin in Poplar essentially asked the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, to reassure his mum and dad that he's safe, having recently moved to London and taken up what I presume is his first job. So I appreciate that statistics are relevant to part of the answer, but I wonder if you can reach out, possibly even bring some emotion into it, give Amin's parents some reason to be a little bit more optimistic that the future is going to be a little bit better than the very recent past.
I think the questioner who followed Amin, who mentioned the hundreds of knives seized by the police just in a month from people carrying knives, should give some confidence that the police are taking action against those who think it's okay to carry a knife. It's not okay to carry a knife. If you carry a knife, you're not going to be more safe. You're going to be less safe. You know, even with 30,000 police officers, they need our cooperation. We've got to be the eyes and ears of the police. If you're a mum and a dad, a big brother, big sister, an uncle and auntie, and somebody in your home is leaving the house with a knife, and you can't persuade them to leave the knife at home, you've got to ring the police. And by ringing the police, you're not only keeping that young person safe, but you're keeping the rest of Londoners safe as well. And the police rely upon the intelligence from the public. And I've had examples, James, where the police have gone to speak to the victim who suffered serious injuries because of being the victim of a knife crime. They've spoken to the best friends of a young Londoner who has lost his life, and they're not coming forward to help the police. In those circumstances, it's really difficult for the police to do their job. And so the message I want to send to Londoners today is this. Look, the police work incredibly hard. They're overstretched and under-resourced, and I have nothing but admiration for the police. But they need our help to make our city safer. We're doing our bit from City Hall, and the Met Police are doing their bit. I'll carry on lobbying the government to give us the resources we need. But we police by consent. And I'm hoping that Londoners will come forward and give the intelligence, the evidence that the police need to keep us safe.
Okay, he just explained that the... Listen, I appreciate you three there. It's lovely that you've come along tonight, and I'm really enjoying your company, but the microphone doesn't pick up what you're shouting, so all that happens is that everybody else in the room has their evening ruined. So, I mean, by all means, carry on ruining their evening, but consider this to be your final warning. With the greatest of love and respect. Peace. It's not just a question, Sadiq Khan, of refusing to cooperate. A lot of these young people who have been victims of crime or who have had friends and family members, they tell the police to get lost. They don't just say, no, we don't want to help. They say, get lost to the police. How on earth do you break through that kind of barrier if it is their help that you're going to need in bringing people to justice? It's almost as if they feel more kinship with the rival gang that's trying to kill them than they do with the authorities that are trying to keep them alive.
Well, firstly, look, I don't apologise for the police being tough on people who think it's okay to carry a knife. I'm not going to apologise for the police doing more targeted stop and search to get knives off our streets. But the police work incredibly hard to give the public confidence in them. What should reassure Londoners is the body-worn cameras. The police make sure they turn them on during the interaction. But we've got to work even harder to make sure young people understand that there's no alternative to the police keeping them safe. The idea that a criminal gang will keep you safe, the idea that you'll get a sense of respect and belonging by carrying the knife. All the evidence is it's untrue. And that's why, in addition to...
All the evidence is that it's what these young people believe. Lots of people believe things that aren't true.
That's why, in addition to investing in enforcement, the monies that I've announced, we're also investing in young Londoners, because it's about prevention and diversion, giving young people an alternative to a life in crime, giving young people an alternative to belonging to a criminal gang. And you know what? All we see from other parts of the world where it's been a success fighting this issue, Scotland and elsewhere, is this holistic public health approach. And I'm not going to apologise for investing in young people.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Amin, but did you hear anything there that will reassure your mum and dad? Excuse me, is your name Amin? Can we go back to the original questioner, please? Madam, again, if you haven't got the microphone, no one can hear you. Just bear with, please. Amin.
I think my parents in Dubai would be really reassured to hear directly from the mayor. And so I think, as Londoners, we have to put trust in the mayor.
Well, it's not compulsory by any stretch of the imagination.
I feel like I can trust the mayor.
Okay. And you feel like you don't, you see? That's freedom of speech and democracy in action, except he's willing to let you speak. If you could just be willing to let him speak, then everybody will be happy. We can all shake hands and celebrate victory in the football. I don't know anything about the score in the football. Let's go to Ian, who's in Hillingdon. Ian, what's your question for the mayor?
Hi, I'm Ian Rice for you, Mr. Khan. Right, on the 26th of January this year, my son Harry Rice, together with his friend Josh McGuinness and George Wilkinson, were mowed down and killed, and were murdered on Shepperdston Lane in Hayes, Middlesex. This is Harry's mother here. Right, now this was a deliberate act. We have given proof to the police, to the CPS, of the passenger who was a Pakistani Muslim with very, very strong views towards IS. He even posted on Twitter and Instagram even today. And the police and CPS sat around the table, shrugged their shoulders and said, well, it makes uncomfortable reading. Now, there are a few questions there is, why within half an hour or an hour do the police always dismiss it as being terror-related or racially motivated? No. Right, not terror-related or racially motivated. In other words, it's just a road traffic accident. All the incidents lately, are classed as not terror-related at all. Now, in this climate, universally, the weapon of choice is a vehicle, a motorized vehicle, a car or a truck. That's all around the world. And yet the police dismiss it immediately. We didn't realize the amount of corruption there is within the police. Right? Right? That has gone up to the CPS, because the CPS can only go by what the police put in front of them, but they're trying to make a slightly better job of a very bad job that the police have done. That, in turn, has actually gone up to the courts. Nothing is referred to. When it's in black and white, in a crash report, on the CCTV footage that we have, those are not even referred to by the Crown Barrister who is working for us. That is not brought up and referred to in the court. In fact, what they refer to is a total pack of lies. And I have even pulled the barrister up on it and said...
Ian, I'm a tiny bit worried about contempt of court. I don't know what the situation is with
the situation is done and finished. It's dusted, okay?
Also, while we're here, I'm unspeakably sorry for your loss, sir.
Thank you. So what I'm saying is, you know some of this about this case, I think, Mr. Khan, because I think when you were at Grenfell a few weeks ago, you met a young girl who refused to shake your hand. Do you remember that? And you kept on saying to her, why don't you want to shake my hand? And she said to you,
I'll never shake your hand over my dead body until you get justice for our boys.
Yeah. Do you remember that? So, and then she said, what were you going to do for my 3 friends? Now, we need you to really shake up the police, because they're not giving us the paperwork. They're delaying everything. The passenger who is implicit in this is a totally free man. This man got 13 years for killing 3 lives, murdering 3 boys. The police have also, the police have also tried to manipulate the eyewitnesses.
These are really serious allegations, Ian.
Listen, it's true.
They're all facts. They're proven.
But they're clearly not proven in court.
We've got evidence to everything.
That doesn't mean proven. Nobody here is your enemy. Okay?
I understand what you mean.
It's not me that's going to get into trouble for libel or contempt.
No, I understand what you mean.
It's you two guys.
We don't mind.
No, you must
We've
mind.
had the worst thing that could ever happen to us. Do you think we really care?
You're talking to me as if I'm your enemy. Of course you care. You're
you
there
know
to look
what?
after your family. We're trying to move towards the question. I have a basic understanding of contempt of court law and libel proceedings, and nobody in this room wants you to stand accused of those crimes today. We register your pain. We sympathise enormously with your loss.
When they all lie themselves.
But this is again an allegation of libel being made against the Metropolitan Police.
Listen, I stand by it. I stand by every word.
But it doesn't matter whether you stand by it or not. This is simple law, and I'm trying to stop you breaking it because I don't want you to get into trouble. So move, if you may, towards the question that the Mayor can realistically provide an answer to. And I have to tell you, Ian, there is no answer in the world that's going to bring you the comfort that you seek.
I understand. I am aware of the law as well, probably a bit more than you. So if I have the proof, then I'm happy to say it. Oh, right, Mr. Mayor, all I'm asking you is you need to have a word with the Met Police, who have tried to slam every door in our face, okay? Right, we wouldn't be coming up with these kind of allegations if it was just pie in the sky, okay?
Let's begin by asking the Mayor what he knows about the case, shall we?
I did. What do you know about it so far?
Firstly, can I give you my condolences as well, both of you? I did. Well, I give you my condolences. I'm terribly sorry for your loss, and all 3 young men who lost their lives. More about the case of what I saw in the media first, which is these 3 young men going to 16-year-old boys, going to the party of their friend who was 16. And I did meet her at Grenfell Tower, the march, and we did shake hands, actually. And I gave her my card and said, please email me, because I'm keen to meet the 3 families, to discuss with them the concerns they had. You didn't email, so I contacted the local Member of Parliament, John McDonnell, and asked him if he knew about the cases. And my understanding was he spoke to somebody involved with the case, and she said there was no help that was needed from me. My offer's still there, by the way. I'd be very happy to meet with you and all the 3 grieving families to discuss the concerns you've got, because you may have legitimate concerns. I mean, James hasn't heard the entire story, nor have I. But the least I can do to you is to meet with the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime, Sophie Linden, and hear you out. And the only promise I can make to you is this: I'll make the time to meet with you. And we did give the young lady my card, and because it's tragic. And, you know, I've got 2 daughters as well, and your 3 children were doing nothing wrong. They're on the way to a party. And so let me meet with you and see if we can try and help address some of the concerns that you've got. Some of them may be legitimate. I simply don't know.
To clarify, the driver of the car has been convicted and imprisoned. Is that correct?
Yeah, he got 13 years.
And your grievance is that you feel that the
He
attack...
got 13 years.
Yes,
he got sentenced on the 28th of March,
Yes.
and within 28 days he put in an appeal and said it was too harsh.
That's what happens. And we'll have to wait and see whether
Remorse?
Well, I don't know him, but I just want to clarify. He's been convicted and sentenced, but your grievance is that you feel there was a racial element to the crime that hasn't been...
No.
Forgive my confusion.
Well, hang on. There was a racial. It was either racially motivated or...
But that's what you're cross about.
It was an extremist view. Yeah, but apart
Okay.
from that, this wasn't just an accident where they said it was a speeding or a dangerous act, okay? That's what it's been classed as. Death by dangerous driving.
In a sentence, Ian, your complaint is, and leaving aside allegations of corruption, and in a sentence, what is your complaint? And then I can keep an eye on the story.
Okay, our complaint is he's in the wrong charge.
Okay.
He should be under the charge of 3 murders and 2 attempted. Now, let me just clarify that.
Very briefly.
It's not pie in the sky. Okay,
No
the
one
crash
said it
report
was, mate.
says, the crash report says he never lost control once, okay? And then the officer said, because he sat on the fence, he said, all I can say is it might have been the little bit of alcohol in the system, right? And when we questioned him further, in front of the CPS, he said, if I didn't think it might have been the bit of alcohol in the system, he would be charged with 3 murders and 2 attempted murders.
Okay.
Because there were 5 people on the pavement at the time. And the judge, the only thing the judge did right was saying we could have been looking at 8 deaths because there were 3 friends crossing the road when he spun.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And again, I speak for every single person in this room when I say how sorry I am for what you're going through. And your family.
I don't know how we can get in touch with you.
Somebody from our office here is going to come round and give and take your details, and that we're going to ring you directly rather than giving you another card.
And again, if you're not satisfied with the response from the mayor and his team, you know where I am. All right?
I do know where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
God bless. We will move on now to the 3rd question on the issue of safety, and this one comes from Halima, who is from Havering. I don't think she's in Havering. She need a very loud voice. Halima.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, carry on.
On the 23rd of June, there was a fatal stabbing in Romford, which I'm sure everyone's heard about. A 15-year-old boy passed away. A couple of hours before that, about 2 miles away, my 14-year-old brother was chased by a gang of youths with a knife. He was saved just by a random passerby who told him to jump into his car. I don't know if those boys were the same boys that have potentially killed that young person. But what makes me and my family really angry was that we called the police, they attended, we identified a suspect, we showed them the house party that the group of boys were attending, and the police didn't even attend. They were 15 doors down. I told them I would walk them to the house. They said, no, it's fine, we'll do it. To this day, it's 5 days on, I still haven't received a CAD number. I get a CAD number for losing my mobile phone, but I can't get a CAD number for my brother being chased by 15 boys with a knife.
And this is, from what I understand, this is quite normal gang-related activity that you feel the police are either incapable or not interested in seeking to address. The mayor has only so much responsibility for this. We haven't heard from any of your deputies. Should Sophie Linden perhaps address this perceived lawlessness that almost everybody in the room is quite seriously concerned about. Sophie Linden, of course, is the Deputy Mayor with responsibility for policing. I've never seen anything like this before. I don't mean in the room tonight. I mean the sense on the streets that people are not being protected by the forces of law and order.
I mean, I completely understand your frustration and how frightening that must have been for your brother. I mean, I'm a mother of four teenagers growing up in London, and I tell them to be careful, to be safe when they go out. What happened in Havering was shocking, really, really shocking. And myself and Sadiq have spoken to very senior officers in the Metropolitan Police about what happened, what the follow-up is, and they're coming back to us in relation to what information they had got through. And I'll certainly take your details to make sure that we can follow that up to find out what has happened. On the wider issue of why are what feels like so many young people carrying knives, whether they're in gangs or not, there is gang-related knife violence, and it is very serious, and some of the murders are related to that, absolutely, but it's not all gang-related. We are working, absolutely prioritising tackling this with the Metropolitan Police. Sadiq has put in £15 million, as he said, into the police so that they can be out there every day enforcing against those who are carrying knives. It's really important that the community supports them, gives them the intelligence they need so that they can make those arrests, and so that everybody else can understand that they will get caught if they are out there carrying a knife. It's really difficult. It's a complex problem. There's short-term, really strong enforcement happening out there as we speak, every weekend and every night on the streets of London. More officers are going out. But we've also got to look at what those causes are.
If these crimes were happening in some of the more middle class and prosperous parts of town, don't you think you'd have found the money by now?
Sorry, James, is that question directed at the government or at us? Because actually, we've raised council tax to the maximum the law allows us, plus used business rates to help the police. So £140 million over the last 2 years, the most they've received from a mayor ever over 2 years. But the problem is this, James. It's £140 million when you've taken away £720 million. I know some of the questioners, understandably, are fed up with figures being thrown at them, but we've lost 3,000 police officers. We've lost 3,000 community support officers. We've lost 3,000 police staff. We've lost 80 police stations. We've sold 112 buildings. So I'm afraid we do need money to pay for the police and the resources that we need to keep our city safe. I'm not going to apologise for getting on about it because you're right. It is the case. We have the most anti-London government we've ever had in history. And I'm afraid Londoners are paying the price. But I've got a question for the sister. Did they take a statement from your brother? Do you know if the police got a statement from your brother?
They didn't even take a statement
from him. Can somebody just make a note, just go back there and make sure we speak to her and get a phone number. We'll chase that up
The police
tomorrow.
haven't done anything. That's my point.
And can I just
we will chase this
also
up and
point
make
out
sure. So please make sure.
The more time we have to hear from bona fide questioners like Halima, the more chances there are, however slim, that the mayor might actually be able to do something to address her concerns and her problems. So a reminder to everybody in the room of precisely why we are here. Halima, can I ask you, and please tell me to get lost if this is a stupid question, what would you do if you were in charge?
All the knives need to be taken off. Anyone stopped and searched with a knife needs to have some sort of repercussion. There's no fear left in the police. People aren't scared of the police anymore.
Why do you think that is?
Because they don't do anything. My 14-year-old brother is petrified, and the police haven't even come to do a welfare check, see if he's okay. He could have been that boy that died.
And is your 14-year-old brother, does he respect or fear the police?
His question is now, why did we bother? We should have just beat them up ourselves.
And that is...
This is how gang-related crimes start.
That's how
and
the
this
wheel
is why
turns.
boys get into gangs, because the police aren't policing the streets.
And I'm sure he won't, not least because I suspect his sister would have some very stern words with him if he did. But should your brother end up on the wrong side of the law, it's precisely these experiences that would explain why he wouldn't cooperate with the police in the event of him being able to help them solve a crime.
Exactly.
Thank you, Halima. We're going to move along now to the question of air quality and environment. Darren is in Barnet, or from Barnet. Darren, what's your question?
Hi there. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and panel. My question is, there's been plenty of funding made available for green initiatives, such as £4.5 million government charging infrastructure grants. My question really is, what are you doing to ensure councils in London take advantage of this, since this has been available since 2016, and to date, when I say January, the figure was only 5 councils in the whole of the UK have taken this up.
So did you say from Barnet?
Yes. No, I'm from Barnet, yes.
Right. Well, firstly, James, let me be frank, Barnet is a rubbish council. And, you know, it's an example. It's an example of a council not wanting to help us clean up the air in London. Barnet have counselled food collection waste, and we need to basically reduce, reuse and recycle. And if we don't, it'll lead to all sorts of issues around climate change and the quality of life in London. So what we're doing is this. We're doing what we can from City Hall. So, for example, we've announced policies in relation to, and we've seen evidence of increasing the numbers of rapid charging points. We now have 150. Steve's drivers need rapid charging points because they're being encouraged to buy electric taxis, but there's no point in them buying electric taxis if they can't charge them rapidly. We now have more than 3,000 normal charging points. We're extending the ultra-low emission zone after starting it next year, and we've got the world's first T-charger because we want to clean up the air in London and encourage people to use cleaner forms of transport. We can't do it by ourselves. We need councils to work with us. There are 32 councils plus the City of London. We're looking for partners. Let me give you 2 examples of my frustration with councils. We had plans that took years of planning, consultation and execution in relation to pedestrianising Oxford Street. Oxford Street is one of the most dangerous levels of air anywhere in London and anywhere actually in Europe. And after 2 years of hard work, at the last minute, the council pulled the plug because it's their road and not our road. It's Westminster Council. And one of my frustrations is councils understanding why it's important to think long-term about cleaning up the air and doing things that will help our environment be best. I'll give you another example. Heidi and I are working incredibly hard to roll out cycling across London. We consulted with Londoners. I've got plans for a new cycle superhighway in Camden, and Westminster now threatening to judicially review us. And so what I need from you is to put pressure on your council to understand the importance of air quality in the environment. Otherwise, we'll carry on having this conversation in years to come.
And Shirley Rodriguez, the Deputy with Responsibility for the Environment, the holy grail in this field is odd though it may initially sound, you need to get ordinary voters to feel the same sense of urgency about the threat to their children's health posed by air quality that we currently have articulated in the room tonight, that people currently feel about crime and knife crime. More people are likely to suffer illness and even death as a result of air pollution than they are of any form of violence. Is that on your list? Is that on your just finding a way of increasing the sense of urgency among the general public so that they will support more expenditure and more innovation?
We're seeing that already. On air quality, for example, we get daily letters into the mayor from schools, from school children, from head teachers and so on, saying we are experiencing very bad air quality in London. We can't play outside because the pollution from vehicles. So what can you do? We're hearing it from health professionals, from doctors, and from others who are seeing the not just the deaths brought forward, but morbidity, the illnesses that people are suffering. We were at Sadiq hosted a clean air summit with the metro mayors and leaders from around the country, where there was a lot of consensus about needing to tackle air quality. And we heard from children and from a father of a 2-year-old child who is 1 week out of every month is having sort of asthma attacks and so on at a very, very early age, and is going to experience that unless we do more.
I see a grim parallel with street crime, in that until people actually feel personally affected by it, as Halima so powerfully articulated, they're possibly not going to realise what an urgent situation it is.
As I said, that they are seeing that, and we're responding. The mayor is responding by bringing forward, as we talked about, the ultra-low emission zone, but we're also helping reducing exposure of those children and people in London now by bringing forward, for example, the low emission bus zones. We've seen 2 go in, one in Putney and one in Brixton, which is already seeing a reduction in toxic air emissions already. The T-charge has seen a 30% fall already in the number of non-compliant vehicles coming into the zone. These are things that we're trying to do with the powers the mayor has. But what we were saying to Secretary of State, Michael Gove, who came to that meeting. You know, he asked to come to that meeting, and he's credited Sadiq with asking for the Clean Air Act that we have been, and that he's proposed to bring forward. You know, they are recognising that more needs to be done. And we've been asking for a diesel scrappage fund, for example, that will help people move out of those polluting vehicles. But we do need more powers. You know, around here we know that the river emissions are an issue. We want to be able to do that, but we just don't have the powers to do that.
Thank you very much indeed. I thought Mayor Khan would be bringing his deputies into proceedings, but I'm quite happy to do it if you're not.
I was told you're the boss, James.
Yeah, here we go. Let's move. Let's squeeze in one more question on this issue. Liz is in Newham. Liz?
Good evening, Sadiq. I wanted to ask you what your immediate steps are going to be taken on air quality around schools, especially primary schools, nurseries. I know she sort of answered the question, but I just wanted to know your immediate steps, not just long-term, but your short-term.
Thanks for your question. So let me see the bad news. We already have example of children in London with underdeveloped lungs because of the bad quality that's happening now. We already know in London there are more than 9,000 premature deaths, so we've already now helping finance areas around schools to be cleaned up. And let me tell you the really heartbreaking news. The children in the poorest parts of London are suffering the worst air and have the worst lungs. And so we're investing in things like, maybe some examples of things we're doing is outside schools, parents shouldn't be idling their engines, encouraging people to walk to schools, greening up areas around schools so they can have trees and plants emitting oxygen and sucking in some of the carbon dioxide.
Are there funding?
Yes, there's funding as well. So basically we've done two ways of funding. One is funding to the schools directly. We've done audits to some of the schools. 50 schools have been audited, and we've prepared a very easy toolkit for the other schools to be audited in relation to working out how bad the air is, what measures you can take to clean up the air. And separately, we're giving councils record amounts of money at something called the TIF funding. And basically what it does is it gives councils money, £170 million per year, to use that towards local policies. So things like paying for the entrance for the school to be moved around to a less polluting part of the school. And so it's part of a package of measures that's surely referred to cleaning up the air around schools. Because what you don't want to do is encourage people to walk to school, but they're walking down polluting roads as well. So we're going to clean up the roads, the passages from home to school.
The TIF fund, is it a funding or is it
So
it prioritised by the lowest, poorest councils in London?
So what it is we, City Hall, give the councils, roughly speaking, £179 million a year, and then we make sure we give them the toolkit to do the toolkit around the school. So it's an audit. So you can go into each school now, work out what are the biggest pollutants, how bad is the air, and what are the best ways to clean up the air around your school. Some schools, it could be things like having generators in relation to cleaning up the air. Actually, the air inside buildings is really bad as well, and 80% of that comes from outside the building. And so the councils are a key role to play, and so some councils across London are working with the schools, with the governors. We have one example of a school that Shirley and I visited, where a local business was paying for a staff car park to be turned into a greening area. And so it's getting local businesses involved as where there's no alternative. Look, we can either be the last generation that doesn't get it or the first generation that gets it. And I want us to be the first generation that gets it and sorts it out.
Thank you very much, Sadiq Khan. I have some rather troubling breaking news from America, where I've just been told multiple people have been shot at the Capital newspaper in Annapolis in Maryland. We'll be bringing you the latest on that apparent multiple shooting in the news headlines at 9 o'clock today. I don't know the Capital newspaper in Annapolis, but I will, as I say, be bringing you the latest news headlines as they become available. Moving on now to questions about housing, one of the most urgent issues facing not just the capital, but of course the entire country. Let's go to Sarhad, who's from Camden, I believe. Sarhad, what would you like to ask the Mayor and his deputies?
Hi, good evening. It's actually Farhad, my name. And
Farhad, my apologies.
It's
I shall have someone fired as soon as the evening is completed.
Thank you for organizing this evening and this debate.
It wasn't just me.
Thank you. It's regarding homelessness in London, really. Housing, it is really important, obviously, and that's all linked with violence as well as. We all walk around London seeing homeless people on the streets, and it's becoming a real problem. And I'd just like to know what is your plan and how to tackle this.
What's your concern, Fahad? Are you just a concerned citizen, or
I am a concerned citizen, and I'm really passionate about homelessness.
stepping over people in doorways as you make your way to work in the morning?
I think we all close an eyes to homelessness, and we just neglect it. And I think that's what we should...
So, Fahad, firstly, thank you for your question. Actually, your question, and the answer I'm about to give you, is a good example of the difference politicians can make. So I'm going to start the first part of the answer and then hand over to James for the second part. The first part of the answer is this. For the 8 years before I became mayor, the numbers of people sleeping rough in our city doubled. It was roughly speaking 8,000 when I became mayor. And some people shrug their shoulders and say there's nothing that can be done about it in relation to the issue of rough sleeping. I disagree. And over the last 2 years, we've taken real steps to try to address this blight on our city. It's a moral issue in relation to rough sleeping. And figures we've released today show for the first time in 10 years, the numbers of people sleeping rough in our city is going down. I'm still not satisfied, because one person sleeping rough is one too many. And I want James to explain some of the things we've done to have, for the first time in 10 years, rough sleeping going down, and it's gone down by 8% over the course of the last year. And I want James to explain some of the things that we politicians are doing in City Hall.
I mean, as Sadiq set out, the number of people seen sleeping rough last year has gone down for the first time in 10 years. But we can't be complacent for a second, because there's still 7,500 people seen last year.
And it's gone down from the highest it's ever been. So
exactly, having doubled in the last 10 years. And to be honest, the reason why it's doubled is because decisions taken by the government, the root causes of homelessness, have meant that homelessness and rough sleeping have been allowed to spiral out of control. Now, we're in a position where the mayor wants to make sure he's using all of the resources he has to do everything he can to help rough sleepers, and that means working with councils, with charities, with Londoners themselves. I'll give you just a few examples, so this is a specific answer to your question. Over last winter, so winter being the time when people are particularly thinking about rough sleepers and when it's particularly important to get people off the street, the mayor inherited a policy from the previous mayor where it said winter night shelters, so emergency shelters when it gets cold, only open when there are 3 days of it being below 0 degrees in a row. So you have to wait for 3 days of sub-zero temperatures for these shelters to open. Sadiq said that's not good enough. I want them to be open every day when the temperature is going to be that low. They must be open every day. He said that. It was really great that we got all of the councils across London to come on board and do it in their local area as well. And that's meant there's been more support. Now, that's what we can do using our resources. We recently got some more money from government, which means next year we can double the number of people in outreach teams. So people walking around on the street on the mayor's behalf, helping to find rough sleepers and bringing them into shelters and so on. So there is stuff we can do. But what we're really clear about, and I have to say this, and this is part of the plan that the mayor actually published earlier today, is that we haven't got enough money now to fix the problem. We've got money, we've got resources to do as much as we can, and we will go as far as we can, and we're going to keep asking for more, and we ask for more all the time. But we haven't got enough to fix it, and we need to make sure government realise how much investment they need to put in to turn around the problem, because it's spiralled out of control so much. And the most important thing is that the government stop ignoring the root causes. Because if you're going to keep cutting the welfare system, if you're going to keep slashing mental health services, if you're going to do nothing about the private rented sector, if you're going to stop funding social rented housing and so on, homelessness will go up. And that's why we need the government to wake up and change their mind.
James Murray, many thanks. I'll just interrupt proceedings very briefly for those of you, or those of us, I should say, who are wondering what might be going on in the football. I've had a couple of tweets. This will give you a flavour. This is addressed to people at the O2. You lucky people, some of us are watching the match and would far prefer to be at the O2. Or even, dare I say, eating dinner in Newcastle. So I gather that the match isn't among the most exciting entertainments that the country has ever been treated to. I'm not saying this is, but we're doing our best. Time now for a question from Lewis, who is from Croydon. Lewis, what would you like to ask?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Hi.
You've been a fierce advocate on true affordable housing. You introduce a different definition than the government, which appears to not understand what affordable means. Would you consider approaches such as renting control, as in Berlin, or in Stockholm, where the city owns 70% of the land, which gives the mayor more maneuver to track the housing crisis?
I
They
wish.
They do seem to do it better in other cities, don't
Well,
they?
no, they've got powers. I mean, the bad news is we've got no powers to bring in rent controls or rent stabilisation. So what we're doing is being innovative about not simply crossing our arms and saying we can't do something. So let me give you some examples of the stuff we're doing already in relation to rent stabilisation and trying to reduce rents going up every year as they are. Firstly, we've thrown in the bin the dodgy definition of what an affordable home is. So the previous definition of affordable home to rent was 80% of market value or a home to buy of £450,000. We've thrown it in the bin. So when it comes to us giving permission, we say to a developer, for you to satisfy an affordable housing definition, it's going to be one of three things. Either a home where you pay a social rent, roughly speaking, for a two-bedroom property, that's £150 a week, or it's a home where you pay a London living rent, that's a third of average earnings, linked to earnings rather than market value, or it's the third one, shared ownership, part buy, part rent. So we're already seeing now new homes being built that are properly affordable. And last year, we had a record number of affordable housing starts since the Mayor had this power, more than 12,500. Out of those, 2,800 was social rent as well. But the second thing James and I have done is introduce a new landlord checker system. You'll know if you're renting from the private sector, some landlords are very good, some are awful. So for the first time ever, you can type in your landlord's name and see whether he or she has taken action against them, and so you can make sure you're going to a good landlord.
Is it compulsory to register on that as a landlord?
So we've got to deal with the councils now. So if a council's brought a prosecution or they're on a fire brigade, it'll be on the database. And that's really important. That gives you really...
So it's not like TripAdvisor. You don't get a previous tenant saying whether or not this landlord is a good guy or a wrong, and it's linked upon criminal action or
the bar is
complaint.
proceedings being brought into court for a reason you'll appreciate in relation to the law of defamation. The third thing we're doing, though, is to make sure that we can have a model we take to government, because there are two big concerns private tenants have. One is the amount of rent you pay, percentage of disposable income, the rent you pay. But two is security of tenure. We all know a landlord can kick you out of the property almost without any good reason. So we're trying to make sure landlords appreciate this in everyone's interest to have security of tenure. And so one of the things we started to do for the first time is to encourage build to rent. And the advantage of that is you get security of tenure, so the tenancy, if you want it, is up to 3 years. But during the 3 years, the rent only goes up by inflation. And it's really important we have more of these affordable properties as well. And actually, the big change that's going to be is more affordable homes being built in London. And what we're doing is trying to speak to developers, councils, and housing associations to have more affordable homes built in London. That's the real solution to addressing the crisis of housing in London.
It hinges upon asking property developers, who ordinarily are quite big fans of the free market and driven chiefly by profit. This hinges upon persuading them to build buildings for less profit than they could otherwise have accrued.
Well, the condition of you getting permission, Mr. Developer, is you've got to build a certain number of homes that are genuinely affordable, or if not, you get no permission. And actually, we're seeing developers talking to us. But most developers realise, James, they can't recruit decent staff because of the housing crisis. They can't keep decent staff because of the housing crisis. They understand there's an issue. And so developers, to give them some credit, are realising there's a need for them to work with us to build sufficient numbers of genuinely affordable homes. But we've also got a new scheme now to have council homes being finally built again in our city. As somebody who's a council estate boy, it's really important to recognise the contribution council homes can have to fixing the housing crisis. And the third part of the equation is the housing associations as well. So working with all parts of the housing provider family to make sure we meet London's housing needs.
Next question is from Yusuf, who is from Reading. Yusuf, what would you like to ask the Mayor and indeed his deputies?
Hi, Sadiq and the panel. As you can tell, I'm from up north, and some people might call me an economic migrant. But I've been...
How long have you been in London?
2 years now.
You're a Londoner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, heaven's sake, guys. Aren't you tired yet?
It's all right. That's absolutely fine. So my question is probably twofold, and you've touched upon some of it. So coming from Glasgow, coming from a council estate, social housing is a key and personal attribute of mine, and I'm passionate about that. What I see, and I've lived from west to east, the distinct probably lack of social housing, and part of your strategy is ensuring that each borough has that. And I'm asking, do you have tangible levels or facts to say what percentage of social housing is available in each borough? Do you have that fact? And my second question probably is around, I've been trying for the last 2 years to get onto the property ladder, as many people have, and I'm a professional, I have a relatively decent job. I can't do it, so God forbid anybody else trying. It's very difficult to get onto the property ladder.
How much do you think you'd need to be earning, either as a couple or as an individual, to have a realistic chance of getting on the housing ladder within zone 3 or 4?
So as a couple, we earn, I would say, a good low-level six-figure salary as a combined. We can't get onto the ladder. So God forbid if you're near 20, 25k a year, 30k a year, 40, it's impossible.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. So unless you work as a banker or have a private business or earn substantial amounts, it's difficult to get onto the ladder. So God forbid, people that have lived in London all their life, I think it's impossible to get on. So just your thoughts on that would be
It's quite a wide-ranging question, and you've answered some of it already. Can we focus on what the target is? I mean, when you're no longer mayor, if it's your choice to leave City Hall as opposed to the voters' choice, so it'd be at the end of an 8-year term, what would you like to be able to say?
So the amount of homes we need to build a year, according to government estimates, is 70,000. 70,000 new homes each year for the next 8 years.
Nationally?
No, in London.
That's London alone.
So government experts say we need to build, roughly speaking, 70,000 homes in London every year from now. And we agree basically with their target. Over the last 20 years, we've built as a city, roughly speaking, 30,000 homes each year.
Less,
25, between 25 and 30. So there's a previous 20 years shortfall, and you can understand why there's the housing crisis you're talking about. So there is an issue of supply. Put aside the demand issue. 2 pieces of good news. I'll deal with the first one in relation to the housing portal. I'll let James deal with the conversations he's having with council leaders about council homes. So the good news in relation to first-time buyers is we've reached a deal with developers now to have what I call first dibs for Londoners. And that's giving Londoners the first dibs on the new homes that are being built, because listeners will be aware what happens is homes are built, and before they've been marketed, they've been bought by somebody, generally overseas, and they're left empty, or they're used as second, third, fourth properties. So the deal we've done with developers is every home they build that costs £350,000 or thereabouts, for the first month, they've got to be marketed in London to Londoners on the new housing portal we've set up. Go to the City Hall website. And for the first 3 months in the UK, before they can market overseas. And that's innovative, not happened before. And it's an example, James, of us working with developers to try and grapple with the housing crisis. The second issue, I had a meeting with James earlier today about the conversations he's had with the money I've set aside to councils to build 10,000 council homes over the course of the next few years. And there's some good news here as well, James.
Yeah,
and briefly, if you would, James, I want to crack on to the economy. So,
sure. I mean, the mayor's been successful in getting money off government to fund homes for social rent, and that's been a big battle because the money wasn't there when he got into office, and he's been saying it every time we've been talking to government. So we finally got some money to build homes at social rent levels. So what we said to councils just after the elections, which were a couple of months ago, we said to councils, right, come on, let's get on and build some council housing, because people know that council housing, homes for social rent, that's what's genuinely affordable, that's what helps people in the greatest housing need. And the response from councils has been fantastic. You know, we wrote out to councils. Council leaders are always going to be busy after an election, lots of different calls on their time. You know, we've already had at least half the councils have come in to see us to talk about their plans. The others have got getting dates in their diary. They all want to get on and build. They're all kind of competing with each other. Who can build more council housing? And that is a good position for us to be in London, to be building those homes. And those are going to go toward the mayor's target to get 10,000 new council homes underway over the next 4 years.
And very briefly, Sadiq Khan, getting first dibs on it as a Londoner is still not much use if I can't afford it.
Well, no, that's right. That's why we've thrown in the bin the definition. So if you remember, the definition until very recently was either half a million quid to buy a home, or 80% of market value, often out of reach of most Londoners. And so the new definition will help people like the questioner to be able to either rent and then put money aside for a deposit, or be able to buy shared ownership or get a council home.
Thank you. We've only got about 10 minutes left for questions about the economy, which seems, I don't know, it's a bit Brexity, actually, as an observation. Let's begin with Sonia, who is in Kensington. What's your question, Sonia?
My name is Sonia, Kensington. I'm on 0-hour contracts, and the issue is also a friend of mine, we had an injury, so if we're not working, we don't get any money. we don't even get any bids from anywhere. So how can you or the government change the employer to give us security if we can't work?
Thank you for your question, Sonia. I mean, the inverted commas gig economy is a big issue for many Londoners who are doing either 0 hours contract, no sick leave, no holiday leave, and it's a big issue in relation to the uncertainty of work. What we're trying to do is to get more employers to be living wage employers and to employ people as workers rather than as people on either 0 hours contract or as independent contractors. And we've encouraged more and more employers to move into that scheme. We can't force them to do so. We've not got the powers to do so. What I'm doing, though, is using the power of procurement. So if you as an employer, as a business, would have a contract with City Hall or with the police or the fire service or with Transport for London, the condition of you having a contract with us is you've got to be a good employer. And so we're looking at things like, are you a living wage employer? We're looking at things like, do you respect and recognise trade unions? We're looking at things like, what is the diversity of your workplace? We're looking at things like, do you take on apprenticeships and pay them a decent salary? So we're using the power of procurement, but also the other thing we're doing is a new scheme, and I'll let Raj talk about the Good Work Standard, which is about encouraging employers to be, employees have a good work standard. Raj, want to explain what the Good Work Standard is?
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely crucial, especially with the new change in technology. This gig economy, 0 hours contract have become quite rife, and it's absolutely a total disgrace because if somebody is sick, somebody's away on holiday, they don't get paid, they've got no workers' right. I mean, we've fought for hundreds of years to get the workers' rights that we have. So we are developing something called the Good Work Standard, essentially celebrating and recognizing the employers who follow good employment practices, and they will then help other employers to follow similar sort of practices. We've got about 1,500 employers now signed up for paying London living wage, and that is about 80% up from what it was when Sadiq first got in the office. So there's been a significant increase in that. But there's so much more we need to do. And what we find is that 99.8% of all the businesses in London are actually SME businesses. And they don't necessarily have the resources to follow some of these sort of high standards of employment practices. So we want to encourage the businesses who are following good employment practices to essentially help the other businesses to do the same.
And is there any stick? That sounds like a lot of carrot. Can you hurt a business? This is just me thinking out loud. Can you say on planning or on business rates we'll give you?
So the way City Hall can hurt business, to use your phrase, is actually to
encourage.
You may not get a contract from us as a person who gives big contracts, but also what some councils we're working with are doing is reducing business rates. So if you're a good employer and you're paying the London living wage, Greenwich is a good example. Greenwich gives you reduced business rates if you're a living wage employer. And so there are lots of carrots we've got to encourage them to do so. The biggest stick we've got is procurement, James. We are, the budget for TfL is £10 billion. And 70% of that is in procurement, so we can use that as a big carrot.
We're running very short of time. Let's try and squeeze in at least one more question, possibly two. Before that, another tweet about events elsewhere this evening, in response to me tweeting earlier about where I was tonight. It must be better than the game I'm watching. I'm almost envious. We're going to put that up on the boards next year. Almost envious. Elaine is from Swiss Cottage. Elaine, what would you like to ask the Mayor? Hello, Elaine.
I think most of what I wanted to say has been said, but I want to focus on the fact that we're losing our young people in London. Most of the people who are even professionals can't afford to stay. We're losing our firemen, our teachers, etc. And I wanted to point out that possibly, well, I'm not supposed to point out anything. I'd like to ask.
You can, Elaine.
Okay. What is this emphasis on 3 years? A 3-year rental and the concerns and worries. You can't build a society, you can't build a community on 3 years. You need to be in an area for at least 10 years. So, at least 10 years before you can actually start to build a community. And I fear that one of the reasons why we're having these short, very American-like
you're doing a lot of points.
Yeah, sorry, 3-year issues is that that it's a way of keeping people from not building a community and not being able to answer back to what's happening in this city,
Very wise.
which is going to pot.
Why the 3 years?
So there is nothing you said I disagree with. So the 3 years in relation to the build to rent is just an example I gave. It can be 4 years, 6 years, 10 years. A council tenancy is for life.
3.
Council tenancy is for life. And if you buy a home, it's for life as well. At the moment, though, we've got assured short tenancies for 6 months. And you can't put roots in a community if you've got a 6-month contract. And the letting agent gets a fee every time they turn over the property. So the good news is our lobbying has meant the government's agreed to ban letting agents' fees, but we need to have a sense of community in London. And let me just underline the seriousness of your point. Every year for the last, I think 8 years, the numbers of 30-year-old Londoners between 30 and 40...
They're leaving.
They're leaving in record numbers each year. That's a brain drain on our city. That's why James and I are obsessed about building affordable homes to give Londoners a route into our community. But that's why it's really important that we make sure we lobby the government to have the resources we need to invest in our city. Because the question from the gentleman about moving to London as an economic migrant, we as a city are flourishing and thriving. People want to move here because of the jobs, because of the diversity, because of the underlying strengths of our city. But we've got to make it attractive so they can stay here when they move here. And the worrying thing is this. At the moment, we can't keep bus drivers, nurses, porters, but also doctors, chief executives, head teachers, senior officers. And that's all a problem for us as a city. That's why I said in my opening that housing is a big, big issue. That's why it's really important we redouble our efforts to build genuinely affordable homes, which is crucial.
Yeah.
I think, thank you, Sadiq Khan. Thank you, Elaine. I think I'm very, very short of time. I'm going to apologise to Elias, who is here from Chiswick. You can give me a lift home, though, if you want, Elias. Just make up for your disappointment and not getting your question on the board.
He said, catch the tube.
I will be, mate. I'll see you there. But because I want to squeeze in one more knife question with just the 2 minutes remaining. So perhaps Ebenezer, who's from Newham, could direct that question to the stage. Thank you, Ebenezer.
Hey, Sadiq. So my question was about your long-term solutions to knife crime in London. In your speech, you mentioned about a 4.5 million fund.
45.
Really short, Ebenezer, because we're going to run out of time.
And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about those alternatives.
So until the 9th of July, the bids are open. Please bid if you want some of this money for youth work, young people. So it's £45 million over 3 years, a record amount, on top of the previous money. And the idea is to give young people something constructive to do. Diversion and prevention are really, really important. A lot of young people have had the youth clubs closed down. No more after-school facilities available. Cuts in preventative services, cuts in mental health services. What we're doing is investing in young people. And so it's a record sum, £15 million each year for the next 3 years. If you're a youth worker, if you know a club, a boxing club, a football club that wants to bid for this money, please bid.
And that pretty much on the mark. I tell you what, Ebenezer, you're better at hitting the junctions than I am, my friend. I'd have crashed right through the news if I'd been talking. That is almost it for this evening. I'll be handing back to Clive Bull in the LBC studios, where he will be inviting your calls for the next hour and seeking your reaction to what you have heard this evening. And I would like you now to join me in thanking the Mayor and his deputies, Sadiq Khan, Shirley Rodriguez, Rajesh Agrawal, Heidi Alexander, James Murray and Sophie Linden. I'm James O'Brien. Thank you very much indeed for your attention this evening, and good night.